We're live at MedTech, not at Mars, but in Toronto, and we got Nathan here. And Nathan, it's so good to have you. So glad you're here. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so currently I am the Vice President of Quality and Regulatory at Butterfly Network. And we are actually specialized in the ultrasound on the chip technology. So that actually is our kind of unique differentiator from the rest of the market. And we have the world's first single probe whole body ultrasound on chip technology.
Can you describe that, like for somebody who doesn't know those terms? Like, what does that mean in terms of actually getting an ultrasound?
So basically, essentially, you'd have an iPhone and you have a probe or a transducer, and you're able to actually take a cord and plug it into your iPhone, and you can get ultrasound onto your iPhone.
Wow.
If you were to simplify it from that perspective.
That's super cool.
Where can you use something like? What are the applications for that?
So, I mean, if you think about emergency services, or if you think about in a hospital, or even actually in an accident or something that happens in emergency service, somebody is unconscious and they need to be able to know it. A clinician or an EMT needs to be able to kind of assess the person right then and there. You have the portability and the versatility to be able to just pull this probe out of your pocket and to be able to assess a person to see if there's any sort of internal bleeding or any sort of damage. Even look at even some of the musculoskeletal issues that may happen as a result of maybe a broken bone. And you can kind of assess that individual right there at that point of care, so that by the time you arrive at the hospital, you already have an idea of what it is that you actually need to be treating.
Yeah, I just get excited by that. I could imagine, like, defense health. I mean, anything and everything, global health, any disaster.
Well, if you think of the issue that happens in Israel and the things that are happening in Ukraine, we're in both of those markets right now. We've had a global health program that we're actually able to go into those kind of markets and say, hey, in this war zone, unfortunately, you're in a war zone, but here it is. There's a probe that you can actually do triage right at that point of care in that moment without having and it actually has the durability and the portability to be able to withstand that kind of environment.
What about sort of applications for non-physicians to use in really remote or rural or developing areas? Is that
Yeah, when we have a few, right, sub-Saharan Africa, right, where you don't really have a whole lot of connectivity, we actually have the ability to go in this offline mode that allows you to kind of assess individuals, and midwives will go out and assess, let's say for one example, a woman that's pregnant, to be able to assess what their gestational age might actually be. So you have that ability and portability to go into those environments that don't have that kind of connectivity, and to be able to kind of help somebody with their treatment plan throughout their pregnancy. So that's just one example.
Cool. So we're actually in this interview, since it's our very last one here, we're not going to do an MTAIQ, which is mean time to AI question. We're not going to ask you an AI question here. Instead, you're consistently one of the most interesting orthogonal speakers people I've talked to in MedTech, because you come from a quality and regulatory background. That's your expertise. That's the value you serve to your company. But when I talk to you, I'm not talking to a regulatory or quality person. I'm talking to a business leader who happens to lead regulatory and quality. It's a very different mindset. We've had conversations, and the phrase I want to throw out after you spoke about it for a while and kind of your perspective is said, I think you're talking about regulatory as a profit center.
Yeah, almost. you can coin that phrase
but,
if you
but
want.
The thinking's all you. So elucidate us, and what does that mean to think of regulatory as a business partner or as a profit center?
Well, regulatory and quality obviously touch so many different aspects of the business. So I feel that you need to have some sort of business acumen to be a really good quality and regulatory professional. You have to have an understanding of the business and actually see how the dots are connected throughout the business, and how regulatory can actually impact how the business actually operates and how we can get to the market faster. Thus, when you get to the market faster, therefore you have a driver for growth, and it actually is the ability for the company to move at a faster pace and thus recognize revenue earlier in the process. So I always look at it as regulatory affairs and even quality at this point too, but regulatory as a business driver for growth. And we can use that terminology of regulatory as a profit center. But I really think it's important for somebody that's in that regulatory position or in that leadership position to be able to kind of have that business acumen, to be able to, again, connect the dots, but also work with all of the partners to see how is it that we can actually use those regulations to our advantage that allow us then to get to the market quicker. So an example, when you look at EMDR certification, right? So if you look at the EMDR certification, now actually once you obtain MDR certification, is there anything in those regulations or anything in the guidance documentation that will allow us then to kind of get that next generation probe out there quicker without having to wait for another submission or approval? So you can take advantage of some of those regulations and the fact that you've already got MDR certification, and you can kind of look at, okay, maybe my next generation probe falls in the same GMD code, falls in the same classification rules, it's the same category. Maybe if I just put this as a part of the audit schedule or put this on the because of the guidance documentation that's out there, that allows you to just take the sampling, put it on the audit schedule, and then have the agreement between your scheme manager or whoever your auditor or regulatory notified body may be, in the case of the EU, for example. Then that allows you to kind of go and release that product and launch that product in that market sooner, knowing that you've got the tech file and declaration of conformities, all of that stuff complete and ready to go for the next audit when it comes up, without having, again, to submit anything to the regulatory authority. So that's just one example of how you can use regulatory to your advantage to actually use that as a driver for growth, and then actually then at that point launch to the market and recognize revenue earlier.
So I'm going to take a guess that a lot of times people come to you for sort of like a ruling, like, can we do this? Yes or no? And that your answer is, tell me why.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, what's the total addressable market in there? Why is it that you want to go to that country? I want to make sure that as a regulatory, I'm aligning my regulatory activity with the biggest bang for the buck for the business. So that is one of those reasons, like, well, why do you want to go to that market? What is it about that market? Is there a certain, is it just that we want to sell our product there? Or is there just one customer saying that we want to buy your probes? Why do you want to why is that market very important to us? Is there some kind of value that we are able to create in that actual market? And is it because of our product is just really cool and it's going to satisfy the needs of one customer, or it's going to satisfy the entire population or the intended user population that you have in that particular market?
So let me ask like an off the cuff question, is just sort of a bellwether or something. Should every VP of regulatory in a pinch be able to do a sales presentation if nobody else is around?
I would say yes. Yeah, you got to be able to have a passion for your product, know what the product actually does, what is the clinical value that you're actually able to bring to the actual user, and then be able to kind of talk intelligently about what the product actually is and what it's capable of doing. So therefore, yeah, you should be able to have that 1-minute elevator speech ready to go, even as a regulatory person, to be able to kind of sell your product to somebody maybe such as an investor or somebody that's interested in hearing about your product. Why is it that I should actually buy your product? Having that kind of insight and that knowledge and that understanding goes a long way, I think.
So I don't think it would be controversial or a criticism to say this kind of thinking is not something that you traditionally find in the Q&R space. And the people who are attracted to Q&R also tend to have very different strengths than, being able to in a pinch do the elevator pitch. But if you're promoting this view, how do you inculcate this in a team? How do you find those people? How do you shift mindsets or create that value?
Well, it is a change in behavior, right? There's a change in behavior, I think, and a change of thinking that needs to go into it, and you need to sell that kind of vision to your team. So, when I first came into Butterfly, the regulatory individuals are they're always focused on expanding into new markets. What are the requirements? What are the registration requirements that I need to go into this market or that market? How much documentation do I need to put together? Who do I talk to pull all this documentation together? And there's requirements that are very black and white in that sense. And then I know that, the traditional route is going to be a 510K. I know that I'm like, well, let's challenge that idea. Does it necessarily need to be a 510K? Is there something that we can take from this, or a certain piece of that current development that actually has clinical value that we can extract from the current program and then minimize it and then change the claims around it that allow you to then go to the market a lot sooner? So it's getting people to be a little bit more comfortable in operating in the gray and taking certain calculated regulatory risk associated with whatever the development may be. That change in behavior and that mindset, and you have to kind of, as a regulatory leader, sell that to your team to get them comfortable in operating in that agreement, and then kind of get them to understand where you're coming from and then why it's important to the business to be able to think that way. Because, hey, example, we have a product called ScanLab that was an educational tool. Before that product was actually involved, it was in part of the clinical workflow. And the FDA has challenges with that, right? Because they think that, well, that's actually a product or a feature that's part of the cleared clinical workflow, and you're promoting something possibly that may not fall within the, or that may not fall in the educational realm. It's more medical device. But again, if you could take that element, completely separate it from what's clinical workflow and create a completely separate downloadable application, then from there, you should be able to sell that product and create claims around an educational tool that have no impact on the clinical diagnosis or outcome. And then from there, now you can market something that actually is an educational piece that becomes a part of a university's curriculum, which is actually happening to us in that case with Kansas City University, where we had ScanLab actually a part of their curriculum now because of the ability to be able to just learn ultrasound and put up your ultrasound quickly. Again, no clinical diagnosis associated with it, but it's just an educational tool that allows individuals to be able to learn ultrasound much, much quicker, to obtain a better image, which eventually, as they go into practice, now they have the skill set to be able to go out and say, I can obtain this image much, much quicker, and I can therefore come up with my diagnosis much faster. So that's just one area, is just changing the mindset and getting people to kind of buy into that vision of, you know, you can use regulatory affairs to your advantage to be able to kind of create these regulatory pathways that benefit the overall business.
That's just awesome. I think, you know, I think we're going to end it on a high note here, because this is great stuff. That's really inspiring and a lot to think about. And I'm definitely never coming to work for you unless I'm ready to bring my A game every day. So,
Well, thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Have a great conference.
Thank you.